Hi guys, welcome to Pixel Affair. It's Kobe here, and in today's video we are going to recreate our own version of this particular video done by Thomas Bedin. And this was a link sent to me in my Instagram inbox by a follower on how to do this using Cinema 4D. So this is actually a very simple setup, something that you can easily do, but we are going to see how we will use Mograph to do something like this. At the same time, I'll show the simplest way with the keyframe stuff. So let's get into Cinema 4D and see how we will use Mograph to recreate this particular scene. So I have a new scene open and I'm in Cinema 4D R26, but you can use any Cinema 4D version of your choice. So the first thing we are going to do is to recreate our text. So I'll come into my text object and I'll come into object, I'll type in L, right, capital L. And I'll change the font to this particular robo something because it looks like the text that we used that was used in the original one. So this is our text. Now there's something I'm going to do which is only in my 4D R26, but it's not even necessary. You can use the caps and come in here, cap type, and add your regular grid, and add segments. If I change the display, you can see we can add segments in here so that you can segment our text properly. If I change the intermediate point to subdivide and I'll add a bit of subdivision here, you can see it has actually broken our text down nicely for us, right? You can use this method, but then because we have the remesher, I'll simply use the remesher because it makes it easier. So I'll create a remesher and I'll make the text a child of the remesher, and I can see it has given us some nice well broken down quads, right? But I don't want this plenty segments, so I'll select the remesher and I'll actually put it to poly count, and I'll reduce the poly count to like probably 200, right? And this should be fine. So that's all we want. The next thing is that we are going to create a null object, make it a child of the null object, and you create a display deformer and add it to make it a child of the null object, right? So now if you come into the displays deformer and come to shading, change the shading from the to color, you can see now it's inflating our text, right? So I can come in here and I'll control the inflation, how I should inflate and all that. So it's inflating it by 10. Now let's create a subdivision surface. So I'll create subdivision surface and I'll make the null a child of the subdivision surface, and you can see this is how our text is going to look. I'll actually even select the remesher and I'll reduce the poly count to like 100. Yeah, I think I'm cool with something like this. We are not creating exactly the same thing as the text, but something that looks a bit similar. So you can even add a little bit of thickness to it. And let's assume this is fine. Maybe I'll increase the height of the displacement to like probably 20. Let's see how it looks with 20. Let's say it's fine, right? So all we have to do now is make sure our subdivision is selected, come to object and choose current state object, right? So now what we've done is now we've baked down our text. So now we have a new version created for us. So we can delete this one, and now we have to, if I select this, if I take the move to a move, you can see we have this one baked down as a simple mesh, right? So I'll hide this, and now I'll come into this and I'll select the text again. So now let's type in O, so capital O for, and you have our O as well. I'll select this and come to object, current state to object, and then we have the O as well. I'll hide this, and now next let's type in the next letter, which is V, and we'll do the same thing for the rest as well. So now we've created all the text we want. So we have the, let me unhide these ones. So we have the LOVE. So let's name it LOVE. And now let's arrange our text. So I'll move the L out. V out and the E as well. So this is our text, and let's go ahead and hide this particular and the subdivision one. Right, so this is the text that we've created. So that's how we create our text. So now the rest is you arranging it the way you want it. All right, now that we separated the text from each other, let's actually select all of them in the object manager and come to tools, axis center, and you can choose center axis to. And what it's going to do is I can see all the objects have its axis at the tip here. So if I'm rotating it, you can see it's rotating from, all of them have the same axis, but I want it to be in the center. So that's why we are going to use the axis center to do. If I come to tools, if you are using an older version, you can find it, I think, in mesh, in the mesh tab, but in newer versions it's in tools, and it can come axis center and choose center axis to, and I can see now it's a center all the axis of our object. Now if I rotate it, it's rotating from the center. And this is quite cool for arranging our text. It helps us. So now let's go ahead and arrange our text for it to where we want it to start and how we want it to end. Right, so if you bring the original video, you see this is how the text starts. It starts like with the text overlapping each other and everything. So let's sort of arrange it a little bit like this. Right, so now let's take our L, let's start arranging our text, which we are using normal transform. So I'll move it and take this one and rotate it. Those basic stuff, that's what we are going to use to rotate. So it's not something difficult. So let's do that. So now we've arranged our text, and this is our initial position. And at this point, if we're going to use keyframe to keyframe all of them, with this simple sort of animation, this would have been very easy. So at this point, all we have to do is to select all our texts, right? If this, when we are using normal keyframes, right? And let's set a keyframe here. So I'll select with all of the text selected in the object manager. I'll come to, I'm actually ignore, and I'll just click on this particular red icon, record active object. So if we click on it, you can see we have a keyframe set here. And now if we move it to, like, say, frame 30, we can arrange it in the position how we want it to end, which is the other position. So now we will move, select the L. And now before we do that, we should make sure our auto keyframe is on. So we click on this red icon and make sure it's blue. And you can see there's this red outline around our viewport. So now everything that we will do will be stored or set as a keyframe. So if I take the L and start moving it, so I want the L to be somewhere up here. I want the V to go up like that somewhere in here. I want the E to come something like that. And now let me actually turn around to see what I'm doing. I'll bring the V backwards, probably rotate it a little bit. So from here going, it's your own arrangement, how you want your end frame, how you want it to end, and that's basically it. Then the rest I'll just so let's assume this is our how we want our text to end, right? And because we had auto keyframe on, and every change we did, if I select the E, you can see it set a keyframe there, the V, the same thing. So all of them has keyframe. So now if I play it back, you can see it's playing. So it's just simple like that. And now you can see we have our keyframes set, right? So the next thing is that after it's gone up here, we want it to stay there for some time, and it comes back to its initial positions, right? So what we do is we will select all of this, right? We can simply set a keyframe at this point again because it's the same. So we can select all of the text and set a keyframe here, or we could have simply copied this one, and now we want it to go back to its initial position, right, the way it started. So let's move it to, like, say, frame, probably frame 75, and now we want it to go back to where it started from. Now we can't actually move it. We didn't freeze transformation for it to be 0 0, so we can't actually do that because we'll miss it. So the easiest way to do that is to just click and drag around the keyframe. You can see it turns orange. It's selected it, and now if I hold Control and click and drag, you can see it's created another copy. And now if I bring it here, we have we've duplicated the first keyframe. So this is the first keyframe, and it ends at the same keyframe. So if I hit play now, you can see it all forms up and it comes down, forms up and it comes down. So that's quite simple and very easy to do. Now the next thing is to get the extra bounds, the interactions of the text, and that's what you are going to use dynamic. So I'll simply select all of them, right click and come to so I'm using Cinema 4D R26. So the simulation tag is different from the bullet tag. So if you are using an older version like R25 and downwards, you might use the bullet the simulation tag where you can find the rigid body and everything. But if you are using R26 upwards, you might have to look into the bullet tag. That's where you find your rigid body. So with all of the objects selected, I'll go into my bullet tags and I'll choose rigid body. And now if I hit play, you can see everything is falling. You know, it's dynamic. So first of all, let me uncheck the auto keyframe. This is very important. After you are done with your animation, you always make sure you uncheck it before you mistakenly start keyframing stuff. So now we've added rigid body to our text, and now if I hit play, you can see everything starts falling. But we don't want that, and that's because there is gravity in the system or in the scene. So if I hit Ctrl D and come to the project settings, you can see we have a bullet tab here. If I click on it, in there's a default gravity set to 1000. Let's set it to 0. So now if I hit play, you can see nothing happens. All right. So the next thing is for the text to follow the animation. You can see it's nothing is happening. It's just around, not doing anything, like trying to move upwards and stuff. So for the dynamics or the dynamic text to follow the animation, we need to make sure we have all the dynamics tags selected. And if I come into the forces tab, you can see we have all these tabs. The force tab, I mean, you can increase follow position. So follow the position to like say 5, and follow rotation as well to probably 10, right? And now if I go back and hit play, you can see now, and it comes back. So this is how you use normal keyframes to do this. All right, it comes back. It's quite simple. What you can actually do is that you can add a little bit of drag so that it doesn't look that. So let me add like 50% of drag. So the drag sort of slows it down, reduce the energy in the text so that it comes smooth, smooths down. Maybe I can even do it like 100. Let's see. You see now smooths down a bit. So this is how we will use something like keyframe to do this if you want to use keyframes, and it's quite easy. But let's see how you do the same thing using Mograph, right? And in this case, you are not going to have plenty keyframes with all these text. You just use one keyframe to control all of them forming into that particular shape. So let's see how we will do that. So what I'll do is that I'll select these texts, the same text, right? And I'll hit edit, copy, create a new scene, or can come to file, new project, right? And now then I'll come to edit and paste. So you can see we have the text in here. First of all, I don't want all the keyframes that we have set, so I'll come to the coordinate, hold Ctrl plus Shift, and now I can click on all of these red buttons and it will clear all the keyframes that we've set, right? Also, I don't want the dynamics on the text as well, so I'll select all of them here and I'll delete them. So we have the initial state of our text, right? So the next is the other state, and that one we are going to use Mograph. So the first thing we are going to do is to create our fracture object. So I'll come into my Mograph, I'll choose fracture, and I'll make the love text a child of the fracture, right? The next is the second arrangement. So we want to see, this is the first position, the initial position. We want it like that in a square form. So what we are going to use is to create some sort of like, let's use this plane object. I'll set the segments, the width and height segment to 0, 1 for each of them, so that there wouldn't be any segment if I come into the display garage shading. So there is no segment within the plane. And I'll change the axis to like -z or something, and I'll make it this small, very small. So let's actually change our view and arrange the plane the way we want, how we want our text to end. So I'll select this plane, put it here. Okay, let's say I want this one. This one is the first plane, so it should start from somewhere here. All right, the second plane should be somewhere here. Let's hide our fracture. The second plane should be somewhere here. The third one should be somewhere here, and now the fourth one, so this is where we want our text to inherit these positions, right? So what we will do is, now we come into my viewport. I'll create a connect object, and I'll make all these planes a child of the connect object. And the next thing I'm going to create is a matrix object. So I'll come to Mograph and I'll choose matrix, and now we'll tell the matrix to clone on the connect object. So I'll select, come to the object tab of the matrix, and I'll change it from grid to object. And which object do we want to clone on? I'll say the connect object. You can see it's cloning plenty matrix, but we want them to clone on just the polygon center of each of the planes, right? So I'll change it from distribution, from surface to polygon center. You can see we have one in every polygon center. So this is what we are going to use to control our text. So how do we use that? So we select our fracture object, which is the love text. So I'll name it love, whatever. So I'll select it, and I'll come to our Mograph effectors, and I'll choose inheritance effector, right? So what we are going to use, that we are going to tell it to inherit the position of these particular matrices, right? So now let's select the matrix, tell the inheritance effector the object we want it to inherit is the matrix position. So I'll just drag in the matrix in here. Let's unhide our love object. You can see I've dragged in the matrix in here. Let's make sure the inheritance effector is added. And now in the inheritance effector, I've dragged in the matrix, right? So what you have to do is, then down here you can see morph motion objects. Immediately I check that, you can see our text has jumped into the various positions of where the matrices are, right? First of all, it's flipped over, so we can go into the matrix, and I'll come to transform, and I'll turn it to like 180, right? You can see now our text is looking right. Another issue is that the arrangement, we want the L to be where the V is, and all of that. We want the O to be where the L is, and all of that. So how do we do that? We have to arrange it. So before I do that, let me first hide the love matrix, and let me actually also hide the connect object, so we wouldn't need it. And if I come into the matrix and come to in the transform, I can change the color to like something like red, so that we see what happened. So in the display, I'll change it to index, and you can see the index of our matrix. So this is 0, this is 1, this is 2, this is 0, this is 1, this is 2 and 3. So it starts from 0, 1, 2 and 3, right? So in our text arrangement, if I bring back, the L is going to be 0, O is going to be 1, V is going to be 2, and this is going to be 3. So we want the O rather to be 0. So you can see now the O should be the first letter. Now the next letter which should come is the V, because we want the V here, right? So the V should be our next letter, and now the L should be the 2, and the E should be. So we are fine now. So now all we have to do, if you come into our inheritance effector and now increase the strength, you can see we are animating it. Actually, the V is supposed to be up here rather. So I'll come into the love text, and now it's the E which is supposed to be the second one, and the V is supposed to be, am I getting it right? I think so. So now let's, yeah, so this is how we want it. So we can see we can use just the strength of the inheritance vector to control it, or we can actually even use fields. So if I come to my linear fields, you can use the fields to control it. Let me make sure my inheritance vector is on 100%. And now if I use the linear, you can see you can use the linear to control it like that, right? So the L moves and everything. So we can use even the field to control it, but we are not going to do that. Let me delete the field. And now we have our object. You can see it's intersecting, but we can actually control because we are cloning on these particular planes. You can select the plane, and whatever we do to the plane will affect our object. So if I select, so for instance, the L, which is V2, right? So you can name this plane L. You can name this one. Which one is this? So we can name this one E. Can name this one O, and the last one V as well. So now we can simply select any of them, and you can use to manipulate it the way we want. So you can see when I take the plane and move it, right, I can now do the same arrangement I did initially. So you can go ahead and play with your planes or your text the way you want to arrange it using the plane. And at the same time, even though you are controlling it, it's Mograph, so it's quite powerful, and I like this style, right? I'm coming to our E, move it somewhere, which is this particular plane somewhere here. Probably rotate it a little. Take the O, rotate it if you want. Let's assume, yeah, cool. Right, and actually select the E, move it a bit forward. So now let's assume this is how we want that. Now you can go ahead and hide our planes. This is how we want our text to end. So all we have to do is to keyframe them and keyframe it back, the same thing. So all you have to do is at frame, probably frame, let's say frame 10, I'll set a keyframe at frame 35. Actually at frame 10 I'll set a keyframe at 0. So this one is 0. Then at frame 35 I'll set another keyframe. I want it to be here, and we do the same thing. We can copy them. So I can at frame 60 I'll set the keyframe, I'll keep it at 100 and set the keyframe, and at frame 85 I'll bring it back to 0. And now let's hit play. You can see we have the same thing using Mograph and one slider to control the animation. Right, the next thing is the interaction, and you are going to use the dynamic as well in this particular instance. Right, so I can simply right click on the Mograph, and I come to our bullet tags. If you are using an older version, you go to simulate. That's where you find the rigid body, like I've said. So bullet tags, and I'll add my rigid body, and if I hit play, as usual it will fall because there's gravity in the scene. So I'll hit Ctrl D, and I'll make sure the gravity is set to 0 in the project settings where the bullet is, right? And now if I come back and hit play, nothing really happens, right? So if we come into our forces from position, we actually increase the follow position. You make sure it's set to 5, and the follow rotation to like 10, and let's hit play to see what's happening. And you can see we have our animation back. So let's actually increase our timeline a little bit to like, let's say 100. And now, all right, and you can do the same thing, like increase the drag probably to like say 100, and let's increase the timeline a little bit as well. So let's do it 120, and all right. So one last thing we will do in this case is that we are going to bake the animation. So I'll right click on the Mograph and I'll choose Mograph cache, right? Mograph tags, I'll choose the Mograph cache. So with the Mograph cache tag added, I will simply, first of all, reduce the number of frames that we have, because this is what you are going to use it to get our looping animation, so that the last frame and the first frame will be the same, so that we get some nice looping animation. So I reduce the frames to 100 so that we don't have a long waiting text. Then I'll come to the Mograph cache tag. Then I'll click on bake. So bake animation. So now I can scrub through and you can see everything plays very normal, right? And it goes back. But you can see at the end, see the beginning and the beginning. This is the beginning and this is the end. You can see there's a little bit of jump in there. So that's what you are trying to see, if you can use the Mograph cache tag to reduce that jump so that it feels smooth. So what you are going to do is, in there you come to the playback tab, and now you can see down here we have loop. If we check the loop and we set the loop bleeding into, like, say, let's say 50%, and see how it looks like. You can see now we don't see that jump a bit. Let's see actually. So this is the beginning frame and this is the end frame. So you can see there's no much difference with the loop enabled and set to 50%. But what it has also done is that it has reduced the intensity of the animation. So if I reduce it a little bit and see, and see now. So maybe let's do it like 20, 25 and see what happens. Yeah, so I think the 25 is fine. So that's how you do something like that. And now from here going, it will loop forever if you want it. So the rest is for you to add your materials, your light and your background, and you are good to go. I hope this was useful and you learned something in this video. If there's any comment or feedback, please kindly like or comment in the comment section and give me feedback. You can also comment, send me a message on my Instagram for something that you probably want me to understand a bit further. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.